course, inspections and the certification of work. So I'm not going to put any emphasis today on the processing, but let's have a little look. So what I'd like to do first is just have a look at the interactive course guide. So so if I press on that, why isn't it not processing and inspection? So, okay, check that. Because when you've done a few of these, you forget which ones you've done. Morning. Okay, so the inspection of work. So remember, I pointed out in the regulations that there's a regulation for vetting, there's a regulation for code compliance and certification, there's a regulation for inspections. So that's the regulation 7.2E, okay? Planning, performing and managing inspections as per the building accreditation regulations of 2006, all right? So there's these sections in the Building Act, there's conditions, there's 5 conditions that can be placed on a building consent. So what that actually means in real terms, so you explain to me what a condition might be. What can you imagine as a condition? Not necessarily, you know, in the Building Act sense, but do you understand the word of, you know, hey, I want you to do this, but if you only have to do, you're only allowed to do it this way. So I would say that's a condition. Would that be correct in your understanding? Yep. I want you to paint the wall yellow, but I want you to be aware that the wall has bracing, so you have to leave that area of the wall unpainted. That's a condition. Yes. Because the building inspector has to come and have a look at that to bracing. That's a condition, right? So section 67, 73, 75, 90, and 113. And I mentioned as discussed above. I don't know what that means. I haven't discussed it. Oh, might be, so it's lesson 2 of 2. So granting a consent, right? So these sections here, this is the processing one. And there's the regulations which we discussed. What happens if a BCO identifies an area and is appropriate waivers, modifications, that hopefully it's going to come up with those conditions that we just talked about. Anyway, there's section 67, section 49, of course, is not a condition. That's basically building consent has to grant, right? Granting a building consent in section 5. So 51. Oh yeah, here we go. So section 113 specified, is the specified life being taken into consideration? It's a condition of it, right? Section 90, okay, that authorizes a council to actually access the building site during working hours. Okay, section 75 is the building built over 2 sections down a boundary, so that's another condition. All right. Okay, section 72, subject to hazards. So is there asbestos? Is it a flood zone? Is it bad ground? That type of thing, okay? Section 67 is a waiver or modification of a building code, right? And that, so it was really an interesting thing with me, and an Auckland Council trained me wrong until I started with Future Skills Actually, it's the wording that they used was wrong. So they used to waive, 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 an inspection for waterproofing, right, in a bathroom. So, and they still do, okay? But the wording, so you've got to be very, very careful in the Building Act, because the Building Act is all about the law, and the law is all about words. So you've got to learn the language of the law to be able to understand. So when I came to Auckland, Future Skills, and started teaching, this is 2020, and I started teaching about waterproofing. And it's E3, what happens when you do a waterproofing inspection. I have waived the inspection. And then Peter and Patrick jump on top of me and go, you can't use that word waive. I said, why? Because you haven't waived a building code. Oh, and so actually the wording for Auckland Council now is that you have a third party inspection person to do the job. So you haven't waived your right as a council. You basically have only asked someone else to do the same job. The job is still required, right? So the concept of a waiver or a modification is exactly what happened to my mother-in-law when she wanted to get her house completed for a code compliance. So the main one that I can think of is, so can you remember the building code for durability? Can you remember the letter? B2. Thank you, Ruvi. So there's this thing called a B2 waiver. So what's going on there? So Auckland Council ask for homeowners to waive council to take responsibility for the durability on a home if a home is older or has not had a code compliance. And so what happens is the council gets my mother-in-law, who's 80 years old, to sign, and this is what happened. So the cladding on Judy's house is polystyrene. Polystyrene is a problem child. Polystyrene cladding. So what happened is that, an example of a B2, a waiver, is this thing called a B2 waiver that Auckland Council uses, right? So essentially what happens is the council get the homeowner to apply basically when was practical completion. So Judy's moved into that house in 1998. It's practically completed. That's the word I was having trouble with the other day. Master builders ask for a document of practical completion. All right, it's got nothing to do with the code compliance. It's got nothing to do with any of the regulated documents. It's just this thing called a practical completion. All right. All right, so what ends up there, and then it's got age of work, right? So when Judy came along and decided in 2000, I don't know, 5 years ago, so maybe 2019, 2020, I think it was before COVID, all right? Yeah, it was definitely before COVID. So in essence, her house had finished in 1998, right? So technically, ladies and gentlemen, this house has a live consent. There is a consent that is alive. They went to get their code compliance certificate back in 1998, and it was rejected. Okay? There were handrails or some little issues and stuff. But Judy got the practical completion certificate, she thinks is a code compliance certificate, and pays. and then the guy goes broke. Anton Holmes goes broke in 1998, 1999. All right, so we're talking now 20 years later, and Judy wants basically to get her code of compliance. What the Auckland Council want to know is what's the age of the building work? How many years from 1998 to 2020? It's 22 years. So what's the durability on cladding? Okay, what's something that's difficult to get at, but you can get at it? 50 years, 15 years, and 5 years. 15. So remember, the reason I say that, and thank you for, good on you, it's not structural, right? So we can rip the cladding off, replace it with something else, but the building will still stand, right? So, but in actual fact, in this circumstance, it is 22 years. Still 15 years. Yeah. So what's just there? What do you call brick in New Zealand? What do you automatically say when you say brick? Brick veneer. Right? Brick veneer. It's a veneer. It's not a structure. Right? Whereas in 1930s, when I showed you buildings collapsed in Napier, that was not a veneer. That was a brick structure. On the weekend, I was in a pub with my son down in Fort Street or somewhere near there, right? And we're standing next to a wall. And I said, Jesse, this pub that we're sitting in has been here for 150 years. Can you imagine that? That, like, you know, he says, how does it stand? I says, they've had to redesign it. And the poor kid's getting picked on. But anyway, but the point being, the council want to know, oh, it's over 15 years. So actually, if Judy had chosen not to sign this document, if the council have every right to tell her to rip off all the cladding, replace all the windows with double glazed, increase the insulation to the current building code. This is the point. This is the point, is that it's really important that you are open. Yeah, it might be an easy street and you might never get code compliance, but think about the next person that comes to buy that house, has bought it as is, where is, and doesn't realize that there is a consent that's live, that's never been resolved. And the council plays hardball and says to you, nah, we're not even going to go for the B2 waiver. We're just going to go straight to a notice to fix and expect you to actually pull that thing apart. And if not, by a certain date in 6 months, it's $200,000 all up in front, possibly, and then $20,000 a day. Can I just ask you all to mute you guys online, or I'll mute you anyway. There we are. Sorry. Okay, so this is a B2 waiver, and this is basically what the council's talking about when it comes to here. So a modification allows the council to exercise judgment when dealing with unusual building compliance matters. All applications for a consent are required to comply with the provisions of the building code. Clause B2 deals with durability. This clause contains provisions that in general terms require all building elements to be durable for a certain period, assuming normal maintenance. The periods contained B2.3.1 and range from 5 years to 50 years. The required durability periods for individual building elements are determined by the use in the building. And ease of application and the ability to get them off or not, right? But really, this is the cheap way out, right? From the perspective now, Judy doesn't understand this. You know, she's a school teacher, right? My brother-in-law understands it. He built the building. I understand that I'm the guy that had to get code compliance. So the only way to get it across the line without having to replace all the cladding in the windows is get to sign this. So that's the reason probably that contract on that house there fell over 4 times, because it's the building inspector or whatever he was, building surveyor, 4 different contracts says there is the possibility of weather tightness problems. There isn't weather tightness problems, but there is the possibility of it. So that's what I think it's worthwhile you as students to understand that. So I don't really know what happens with other councils, whether that they play that game or not. But anyway, they certainly do. That's what that means. Okay. Right. So let's just go back to. I'll get you guys can. Huh? Yeah. 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 I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether I told you, but like, yeah. So you gotta get your head clear around when it comes to the issue of inspections. Okay. So my interpretation. So in section 90, if we come down to section 90, all right, 90 there, inspections by building consent authorities. Okay. So to inspect, so the role of inspections for territorial authorities. So yeah, see inspections by TAs. So they do different. So the conversation about me going to a site without invitation sits within that environment where essentially there's a building dispute, and I have a warrant just like a policeman, and the warrant allows me to actually go. I have to go to the front door. I have to introduce myself. I can't just bowl in, and then I go to look at the disputed issue. My boss, who got all the time in the world for him, and if you're in Kaipara, that's where he works now. Okay, Kaipara Council. Okay, so Greg, he just goes straight around to the problem, the foundations or whatever it is. It's like, imagine if that someone had come into your house and just gone, you know, you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to go to the door. Okay. So in answer to your question, let's go back and let's double check what section 90 says. Okay. So every building consent is subject to the condition, right, that agents are authorized by the consent authority for the purposes of this section at all times during normal working hours while work is done. So it doesn't define anywhere here the timings, does it? There may be a section somewhere, maybe not in the Building Act, but it could be Local Government Act. What's normal working hours? 8 till 4, 7:30 to 5. I don't know. I don't know. I was in Singapore and I was watching them working at night in the dark with their lights on. Is that normal working hours? But anyway, yeah. So in answer to your question, yeah, yeah. It depends on your neighbours. Yeah, totally. Oh, in that situation, it was the neighbour that disputed the work, and the guy's going, "Who freaking dobbed me in?" And just look at it. I bet you it's that guy, that neighbour over there. So yeah. So yeah. Okay. So let's just, now that we've showed you that. All right. So we'll just move on. Okay. Oh, yeah. I didn't even have to go to the Building Act. There it is there for us. Okay. Oh, yeah. I think it's worthwhile noting here. In this section, inspection means the taking of all reasonable steps to ensure that building work's being carried out in accordance with the building work. Inspection. Okay. Now, I hope that because there's this other thing that it's not in here. Okay, so I'm just going to say it. In the process of, and maybe it's so in the process of development of this thing called the Building Act, they do amendments and everything like that up here. See versions and amendments and so on. There was a period of time, and so there's actually a paragraph 4 that doesn't exist in the current legislation, but it does exist under a thing called the Building Amendment Act of 2013, which hasn't been introduced. Okay. And it says essentially the process of inspection does not necessarily mean that someone has to do a site visit, something like that. So it's been around, as you can say, 2013. So it's been around from the government's perspective, and we're talking Labor and National, setting it up. So in essence, we're going to look at a new way of doing inspections. They're not going to have Carl drive around and visit and slow a job down for 45 minutes and do 15 or however many, 6 to 8 inspections a day, or okay. They're going to do it. So that's the introduction, I believe, to the modern methods of construction, which is in essence having a factory built home in China, in Vietnam, in Malaysia, a factory built panel. So you don't actually get a council employee inspecting the work. They can still fulfill the building code under the paragraph 4 when it becomes an introduced paragraph, because they can go down the track of checking it via a quality system. So in the factory, little Johnny does the job, he does the building work, then his boss comes and checks it with a checklist. That checklist basically is evidence that the job has been done correctly. Then, in essence, that information comes back with the consent. So it's the same principle. So you've heard of a pre-cut pre-nail yard where they do pre-cut pre-nail frames for houses. Okay, so I'll just show you this. So actually the best one that you can look at is this one here. So Josh Chapman, so he's the guy here. So let's just go Josh, Josh, whatever his name is. He's actually, just give me a second. It'll come down here. I can see it easier. There we are. So Josh the builder, there he is. I am Josh Chapman, and then I'll put in here, where is it there? Pre-nail. Enter. There we go. Let's have a look. So what I'll do for you online, just give me a second. I'll drop it into, and you guys can look at it online. Come on, you dog. And I'll just put it in chat for you, okay? Just so you probably can't hear it. Okay, and it is So just what we were watching there. So if you can imagine an architecture set of plans, so you guys online, it's I don't know what time it is over there, but he uses this factory uses MyTech, okay, or it could be Prider, but it's more than likely MyTech, all right, and they use computer software. What you saw was MyTech software, okay, but the point being is who inspects that the two nails that went into that bottom plate are the correct nails? Who inspects that the brackets that are being used for the trusses are the correct brackets that they said that they were going to use? It is the quality assurance system from MyTech New Zealand that certifies on a yearly basis the conduct of what goes on in the factory. So when that comes to the building site, a lot of the quality assurance stuff, a lot of the checking has already been done. Okay. So that's the same principle as what's going on with the government's mindset, is that why is council double checking something that's already been checked? And I think it's worthwhile knowing that what you're looking at is a manual pre-cut pre-nail yard. All right. But for $6 million, I can build one without any humans. All right. They do it. So there's no human involvement. It's just that we live in the dark ages and we don't want to gravitate to that next level. Because what do we do when we gravitate to the next level? We get rid of staff. But you know what? I'm at the point now, after 44 years of watching this thing called the building industry, they actually don't really care, because every man in that place has no qualification. He's not on an hourly rate. He's on a cube rate. He's on the amount of timber he can do. And all we're doing is got laborers doing hard work for no reason, adding no value to those individuals. So how dare they give us the argument that we can't actually gravitate to that next level of full automation because we're going to lose our staff and we're not going to be able to find. But the reality is you've done nothing for them for the last 50 years as it is. But anyway, don't make you going. That'll do. Okay. Right, so let's keep moving. So I guess I wanted to show you there basically that what the government are saying and what's sitting in at the moment. So what would happen in my circumstance when I would go to a building site in a factory environment, there would be you would do a thing called a pre-line build, which is essentially looking at the frames and looking at the inside of the building. You might do a framing on another house. You might be doing something else on another house, but it's in a factory environment, right? But the point is that you had to stop. You weren't allowed to go beyond a certain point. So it's slowing down the flow. And so remember we talked about that word called reasonable, taking all reasonable steps to ensure that building work is being carried out in accordance with the building consent. All reasonable steps. And so, of course, there's this broad thing. What's reasonable? You know? And of course, what Peter was saying when we talked about satisfied on reasonable grounds, reasonable seems to be they have to have a level of education. They have to have a level of ability. They have to have a level of discipline in their area of function. And that is exactly the argument that the licensed building practitioners continue to talk to me about, or did up to my ending. When are you guys ever going to stop inspecting us? Because you don't need to, because we're licensed building practitioners, right? So that they do their continued professional development. And you know what their continued professional development is? It's sitting on a toilet while they take 10 minutes to do a crossword in the Carter's magazine about, I don't know, the function of the Building Act. Or they might, so there's no discipline necessarily in continually being upskilled, and there's no capacity financially within a lot of the actual people that do the work to take time out. To give you an idea of what it was like for me as a labor only contractor, I am not the main contractor. I'm not the one grabbing the margin or the profit. In essence, I'm physically doing the work, but I've also physically got young guys working for me. There was no ability on my for me to spend time showing Johnny how to do a task. So Papatoe Golf Club is a great example. Okay, I go away. I spent $3,500 going away for a 2-day course with Brands, Building Research Association of New Zealand, to upskill as a businessman. Okay, I think that's a fair thing to do. I need to get educated. While I'm away, my foreman makes a mistake. He sprays a spray all over the decking by accident because the wind caught it and it went all over the deck. And basically that was $5,500 mistake. Now I was insured, but the point being, if I wasn't insured, imagine, and then the point being too is that's not saying that my staff member was not qualified or skilled at what he was doing, but it was the point that looking at sometimes the cost of our education when you're actually physically doing the work won't allow us to actually be reasonable. So on one hand, a guy's arguing, when are you ever going to actually allow us access? Part of the argument is when there is some sort of subsidy on education for the building industry to be added value to it, or the customer who's purchasing the house is charged a fee, and it's just as a tax for your education while you're actually building, so you can take time out. My mother-in-law is a great example. She was a special education worker for children with special needs, right? So that's what she ended up. So she would work with psychologists, she would work with voice therapists, she would work with everybody as a team. Right now, Judy's it's essentially in the business of a really hard business, like 0-year-old kids to 5 years old, mum and dads who basically are now having to deal with children that have special needs. So it's a high pressure job. So just simply by the fact that it was a high pressure job, my mother-in-law would get an extra 7 weeks a year time out because of the stress of the job. Right? So same principle. If we're wanting as a society to want to have a qualified building industry, then in actual fact, as a society, we should be making sure that we're letting everybody have some time out to get re-educated. So at the moment, I still believe that in actual fact, we aren't at that place, but the government are saying it's going to happen anyway. Because there's no reasonable steps that I see in the last 10 years have made any difference. All right? It's just boom, bust, boom, bust. All right? Reasonable steps. So there's nothing happening, but the government is saying it's going to happen anyway. So let's see what happens. Okay, so that's you guys can scroll through that. BCA's perspective, there's certain capacity, typical carrying out between 6 to 8 inspections a day. Now, again, that's subject to, and I showed you the picture of it. So I get a post line inspection and a pile inspection, and it's in Graham's Beach, was at the far end of, Awawhitu, way up, big drive. You're not going to get that amount, are you? So in some councils, they're going to be doing less. Other councils, they're going to do more. When I was at PBC, I was doing 10 to 12 inspections a day. But with PBC, like your your Howick or your Whitford or your, your condensed. So it wasn't and also the other thing is they did away with variations. So we didn't have to stop and do variations and stuff. Okay. Oh yeah, and there's this thing here. So builders tend to be organized and plan deliveries around inspections. Okay. For example, it's no use booking concrete on the same day as the inspection is booked. What if the inspection fails? What if the building consent officer is held up on another job? And what would happen in my situation, in my day, I would ring up and I knew the jobs that were happening. I'd go, oh, g'day, John, it's Carl. Where are you at? I got a concrete pour at 12. All right, so we've got an inspection at 10, or that's fine. Okay, that's fine. I'll make it. I'll actually come earlier just in case there's some stuff that needs to be dealt with or the engineer hasn't turned up or something like that, right? So you end up managing basically your day around, when I was at Auckland Council, okay, this is an interesting point. When I went to PBC, I am allocated an hour, and what's happening is, so what would happen with Auckland Council, you as a customer would go, Carl will turn up between 8 and 4, or Carl will turn up 8 till 12, or 12 till 4, all right, morning and afternoon. But I could manage that, and I was able to work my day. Whereas with PBC, I'm late on one job and I get a phone call from the next client, and then from the next client. So you've got an hour, right? You've got to get there. And, what's worse is then basically they don't ring me, they ring the office, and then the office find out what's going on. And it's like, holy crap. So there was no lineage, there's no movement in the PBC business model versus the Auckland Council. It was 9 till 10, 10 till 11, 11 till 12, 12 till 1, 1 till 2, 2 till 3, 3 till 4. I'm expecting you between 3 and 4. Right? It's like, it's like, but you couldn't convince them anyway. Their position was, they're all about customer service. One of the requirements for them to continue to work for Auckland Council and be in Auckland Council is prove to Auckland Council that they're customer friendly. So being customer friendly meant it was pressure on me, because what if I have, like, I had a car smashed up. That was one situation. A car, 10,000 Ks, and a guy smashed my car up. Right, so that's my day written off. I'm in East Tamaki, and with these cars, they always had really bad radiators. The radiator blew up. I had a customer driving me around to the building sites. Unbelievable. And then there was a few other times where basically the car wasn't working or whatever it was, and it's like, far out. So it stuffs your whole day up because of that 1 hour increment. So you're on the phone ringing your customer over and over and over and over. Hey, this is what's happening. Yeah, no problems, Carl. She'll be right. Yeah, yeah. Or you'd have a situation. Has the engineer been to check the slab? Yes, he has. Sweet. Okay, I'll come around and sign it off when I get around to it. All right. I just played that game. At the end of the day, I'm not an engineer. It's the engineer that basically carries the weight. I'm there to audit that the engineer's done his job. I'm not there to see that actually the steel is this and the margin's that or whatever. Now, there are certain thinkings within council that would go, that's your job. But actually, no, it's not. I'm not a qualified, chartered professional engineer. I am there to, or I believe I'm there to audit something. I am not there to actually check it. So if the engineer has come and signed it off, poor. Just go for it. All right. You know, I don't have an issue with it. But, you know, hey, I'm not there anymore, am I? I wasn't fired for that. So I was never fired, but the point, you know. So, yeah. So, okay. Some BCAs, you know, in some instances, there were up to 4 weeks out, Auckland Council, right? And they simply do not have the capacity or the ability to do the inspections. So when making booking is difficult, builders were block booking inspections. So I've got to get Carl here on a certain day. It's going to be in, can you imagine it? Here's this, I have no concept. When I was building, I didn't have this problem. But imagine a scenario. You basically have got one house, or as a developer, you might have 4 or 5 houses going. But basically, you've got to wait for some guy to turn up to do an inspection on the foundation before it gets poured. And so the people that are doing that foundation are also doing a whole lot of work for GJ Gardner and Platinum Homes and so on. So you're delayed on the delivery. That's 4 weeks out. You've got to book 4 weeks out. So you haven't even started the slab. The slab takes a week to do for the guys. But in actual fact, 4 weeks ago, you would have guessed that 4 weeks from now, we're going to be at the stage. It pours with rain. Staff decide not to turn up. They're too busy working for another contractor. It's just a nightmare, mate. So then that scenario. So, but you can multiply that, and then you've got the cladding inspection. Then you've got basically this inspection, and then you fail an inspection. Sorry, we're not coming back for another 4 weeks till you fix this problem. So it can get quite intense. So that's why guys were block booking. So what they would do is they would perceive in the future on their, their project management plan, and they would go, okay, timeline, on this date, this is happening, on this date, this is happening, on this date, this is happening. Let's make the booking. And let's make another booking just in case that one fails. So the whole system gets bogged up. So that's why it's 4 weeks out. Because in actual fact, the building industry are block booking and double block booking just to make sure that someone turns up. So then I was going to jobs that didn't even require me. So they hadn't gone back and cancelled them. So the app was basically stuffed. It was just so full, and we're 4 weeks out, but we're not 4 weeks out. We're only a week out. But it's because the whole of Auckland block booked all their jobs. And so this happens time and time and time again. It's a real problem. Right. So, example, they will book the same inspection 3 days in a row, and then they'll cancel the ones that they don't. And some of the guys forget to cancel. All right. So, yeah, I'll leave you guys to read that about notice to fix. We're going to talk about that in another subject later. So here's this thing here. So you can see the little button here. And so this is every inspection that goes on. So for example, this is strip footing. There's a picture of a strip footing, right? So excavated trench in foundation is placed and yeah, like you can read. I'm not going to waste your time. Then is it? Yep, the hole. There's pile holes, driven piles. Oh yeah, so that's a good one there. A video about. Let's have a look. Oh yes, this is his. I don't know about you guys. Can't hear anything online. Yes, no.
No, we can't hear anything.
Yeah,
But
I'll
that's
give
okay.
you.
We can just watch it.
Yeah. I'll drop it in chat for you anyway.
Thank you.
So also, so you saw it's called the dolly. The dolly is the thing going dink, 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 right? The size of the dolly changes, right? And what Josh is talking about is the good ground's at 3 meters. So in essence, that you're going to be able to tell by the time you get to 3 meters that a pole or that pile is going to be set, S-E-T, set. But in other instances, you might have what they call undulating or different types of ground. It might be one area of the building, it might be only a metre and a half down. Another area might be 2.5. Another area might be 3 meters. So you saw that guy with, it's called a scala penetrometer, and he's checking the quality of the ground. That's the geotech engineer, okay? So what happens is a engineer comes back to the site, and it's a requirement from us that, so there will be a PS1 certificate that will say this is how we're going to deal with it. So then that gets integrated into the consented plans. So the engineer, Becca Carter, whoever it is, Becca's, they're the engineers. Then someone turns up from the engineering company and measures the set. So every time that dolly hits, and they'll mark with a vivid felt on the pile, and if that set, that pile driver, which is set at a certain size, hits and it reduces by, say, 100 millimeters, then we know the ground is at the right point. But if it ended up going 300 millimeters, we know that we'll have to go deeper. But so then that is not up to the pile driver, that's not up to the builder, it's up to the engineer who originally designed it, or their representative, right? So once that's done, then you get a PS4 from the engineer to say the piles have been done correctly, and we are satisfied on reasonable grounds that this ground is of good quality. And there's something else that we haven't talked about, is that they also get a PS3. So you get a PS1, you get a PS3, and you get a PS4. Right, so the PS3 is from the guy that physically does the work. He's the guy that rams the piles in. So that.
老师去哪了？奇怪，
不知道哎，是不是
是休息
息了？
时间吗？
不知道啊，
我
突然
刚
间就没了。
开那个 YouTube，听不到他在念什么。可是他
突然间就断了。
一般休息也不会直接走掉
老师
啊。
电脑没电了，稍等一会儿。
我刚刚在看那个老师放的那个 Driven Timber，然后完全听不到他说什么，突然就不见了。
掉线了，然后所以老师说休息。
哦，那就顺便休息。OK， 好，谢谢。
Sorry about that, everybody. My computer crashed, so we're just going to have a bit of a break, if that's okay, for 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's okay. I was asking
okay.
them where
Thanks,
did you go? Yeah, cool.
It's a bit-
Thanks.
just crashed or what the heck? All right. See you soon.
See ya.
Okay, so just go back to this. So in this Moodle slide, I'll just double check team. I'm definitely. There we go. That's what I want to see. Now, so recording started. That's good. Okay, sweet. All right, so just looking at the screen. So you've got actually a breakdown of all of the different inspections that I used to do. It's like often you see that RAF floor. So you've got these different videos and stuff down below here. You press on that and it gives you the ability. So some of the times there'll be a video, some of the times there won't be, right? I'm still waiting for the rest of the students to turn up in class here. But yeah, so continue to explore the diverse range of inspection types, and the arrows, you press on the orange arrows up top, just here. So you can see concrete block inspection, nib wall, cavity wrap. It's a massive amount of effort that I've put in the sense of the information. There. Now, I just show you something, if I can. So where this information comes from is from my job at Auckland Council. So what we did when we were at council, so let's go, I'm going to put here, let's go. Oh, okay, I know where to find it. So that there, Code of Practice, Auckland Council Code of Practice for Building Inspections. All right. Oh, so that's the PowerPoint one. Yeah, it'll be long. That's not really. Yeah, I won't do that one. They'll be there forever trying that. All right, share, and then go to here, go to there. Here we go. So at Auckland Council, this was before. So when you look at the bottom of this date here, look at that, updated in 2010. Okay. So this was just before the introduction of the requirement for building inspectors, building processes to have Regulation 18 training. All right. So from when I started in 2009, January the 12th, at Auckland Council, every Tuesday morning, we would have a team meeting, and it was specifically training us about the role of a building inspector, but in actual fact, this is a broader, this is 400 pages. All right. So we did this for 9 months. So as you can see, it gives us the direction on what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to do it as a building inspector, but also as a staff member at council. And it's such a good document. It's probably more an internal document in the sense that it's dated February 2013. So, okay, so you can see. So this is the Auckland Council Code of Practice. So they still use it, but they don't use it because now they rely on externally being trained, having their staff trained. So they're not going to go through the process they did when I was there. And so Jeff, who you met, was one of the team leaders or the managers of this. And then you can see on the screen here, so citing and then basically everything that you needed to do about citing and what you needed to know about citing. And so that's 83 through to 87. So that's 4 pages of information related to that. Just goes on earthworks, foundations, retaining wall. So when I first started at Future Skills, I built a lot of the training because I was the specialist in inspections. So it's inspections first year and inspections second year. I created the content around this book. I used this book. And if so, as the years have gone by, it's still a good book, and it's still got some really good information in here. But if we go further down, he was the guy that essentially he was the guy that talked about he created the E2 matrix. Yes, exactly. So if I go like this, so I should be able to go, because this is not in a PDF format. Sorry, guys. Give me a second. So it was so there was never really any training thing. So this document alone cost $250,000 for them to create. So they had a guy that all they did was basically write this. I mean, and he was in there for days, years, right? Stephen King, right? And so, yeah, and he was the right type of person because he was a very particular when it came. So give me a second. We're nearly there. Inspection types. There we go. This is worthwhile looking at. All right. So on the screen here, you're seeing the residential, right? And what's appropriate for you guys. That's all you need to know. All right. In the sense of the fact that there's commercial inspections as well, but we're not teaching you about that as such. And yeah, just giving you a bit of a broad brush. So at the start here, you've got the siting and foundation or footing inspection, just sitting at the start there. You might see this picture again and other PowerPoints that I've given, but then you'll have a thing called a subfloor. Can anybody understand what that might be? Under the ground. Yep. So what type of floor is it?
Timber.
Timber floor. Timber joists. Yep. You can have a subfloor that has a concrete floor. So there's a thing called a tray deck. And in my house, there is a sacrificial plywood. So I've basically put plywood up underneath the floor. They put the concrete on top, but really the plywood should rot away and still have the concrete there. So it's a concrete, but it's still got a subfloor underneath it. Right, so that's what that's about. And then as you can see the arrows, so then the arrow goes down and it goes straight to framing. So if you've got a house like that one over there, that would be the framing inspection that you're checking there. But there would be more trusses on top. Okay, so often that's a skeleton. I always call it the skeleton. So think about the skeleton. That's what you're sort of checking, right? You're not checking building wrap. You're not checking firewalls. You're not checking anything like that. You're checking brackets and details and so on. So over on the left here, we've got the same inspection, but the building is different. So now you've got a building that has block work, okay? And then you have a slab, or you might have block work, and then you might have a slab and then more block work. So that might be a situation where you'll have a floor and then they build block work on top of the floor and then build another. So because of a pitched building site, you know, all right. And then you'll have framing. Okay. Pre-line build, cladding, so membrane roofing and a deck. So you will have a scenario where you'll have a plywood deck, and the plywood deck has not got what they call the membrane. It's like a fabric on the deck. You're looking at the actual plywood screws. You're checking. You know, I will show you eventually, but you're checking the internal corners as its junctions into the house, that type of thing. But you're not looking at the membrane. You're looking at the before the membrane goes on. So that's why it's sitting straight after framing. Okay. And then you can see the arrow goes up and it goes to the wraps and cavity. Okay. So the wraps and cavity. And if you are lucky, give me a second, I might be able to show you an example of what that might look like. Yeah, and the cavity batten and everything like that, exactly. Just give me a sec. That's what I'm after, that one there. There's such a cool little design thing here. Okay, so just give me a second. You guys can't see it at the moment. Software update is continue. Just click that off. Okay, go there. So this is, so I'll show you online as well. It's a really good way for me to show you what I'm trying to explain, because sometimes it's a bit difficult to understand. So let me have a look here. Where's it gone? Oh yeah, cool. We're in. So come over here. Then we'll go find a model. Let's go and line. There's quite a few here. Here we go. Oh, that's a good example there of a deck that we just talked about, right? So what you got there is a membrane on the deck, right? So what I just said to you is this plywood here is what I'm inspecting first. You see, and it's got those little fillets just there. Yeah. Okay, and oh, where are we? Oh yeah, and the other interesting thing with anything to do with parapets and with decks is it's got to have this 5-degree pitch here, right? It's got, so that is logically, so water hits it and flows. All right, it doesn't pond. All right, I'll just move that coffee because I can see that pouring everywhere. Now, theoretically, I should go like this. Here we go. Oh, not going to do it. It's not going to do it. All right. Probably doesn't like the fact that it's on, so let's just go somewhere else. But we just talked about a second ago about timber battens, right? So let's go, say, to this one and see what happens. All right, so there we are. So you can see that's the building wrap. The building wrap's being cut. The building, then in this situation, the window goes in. Okay. Right, and then if you leave it another second, there's some tape. Now, this is all related to this product. So in other circumstances, the process would be different. But the beauty with this software is it gives that idea to the builder and everybody on how it all goes together. So you've got this flashing that's here at the top that sits up on top of the paper. So that's that flashing there. So you've got a flashing there, but you've also got another flashing on top. And you watch if we keep going. Right, so another tape. Now the battens are going on. Okay, so you see how the battens are going up on the top. So now the cladding's going on, right? So then that's the scriber, right? So you can see inside. But that's really what we're talking about. So when I come to do the wrap inspection, what I'm doing is looking at this level. Okay, so the window will be in, and all the head flashings will be in. The detailing will be correct. And if I spin this right around, now this is probably not a good example, but there are examples where you might be able to see an air gap. There's got to be a minimum of 10 millimeters right around the window. All right, and so but it's not at this stage that I look at that. At this stage, all I'm doing is looking at the wrap and how have they detailed that flashing detail and stuff around there. All right. So if you wanted to, as students, you can download that. That's a working spec, right? And you get, it's a software, it's free. So what happens is companies basically use it for, to explain to builders how to build their products, right? And so I've talked to them and I said, this would be really cool for you as students, because what we could do is, and he said, it's not hard to do. And then each one of these little things here, so it's got the word cavity batten there. I could put in there as per E2 AS1 section 9, whatever it is. So you could look at that and you go straight to E2 and it'll tell you what it's supposed to, where it's coming from. And then in essence, you can then get a look at it and go, sweet, that makes sense. So I just went and saw the guy. He's in about 70s, this guy, the guy who designed this. And there's your double glazed windows. Your head flashing. Then I call that the J mold. When you look at that, it looks like a J. You probably can't see it on that angle. Sorry. That angle there, see how it looks like a J? It's got a J on it. The J mold. Vermin proofing. It's got a vermin strip, it's called. You've got these different names for it. The battens, those battens are different to normal battens because they're this. Yes, that's right. It's they call it castellated. Castellated. Right. What happens is, and this is something I never knew, that I've learned now, that cavity that's in there is not designed for it's really designed for sweat. It's really designed for the air movement from the inside through the wall Because if you look at this wall, it's got pink bats in there, right? Whatever, it doesn't matter what insulation it is, but it's the principle. The plasterboard allows air and sweat from us as humans and our breathing to come through, and it hits out, comes through this paper and then drips down, right? It's not really about the rain hitting this and getting into the building. It's not designed really for that. It's designed for the other way around. Okay. Yes. And that's why I'm a bit more, do you understand the word placid? I'm a bit more respectful of Fletcher's because of the plasterboard and the way that we use plasterboard in New Zealand. And it's surprising that we don't have more houses with mold. So they've obviously done a really good job being able to manage the inside and the outside movement of air, right? So as much as in one hand I give them a hard time, on the other hand I go, actually, how many houses do we know are cracking? There's hardly any. So, if not none. And someone who owns 98% of the marketplace, they must be doing something right. So in that sense, I defend them. So I try my best to be balanced. But yeah, so that's just a quick way, guys. So go to working spec, and you'll probably see it somewhere online. You've got an electronic online version and you've got a software version. This is the software version. But yeah. Yes. Yep. Right. Working spec. Yeah. Oh, sorry. See up on the top there? Working spec viewer. So go onto the computer and Google it, and it'll come up. So if anybody online wants to do that, so there it is there. So watching my arrow, my mark there, just there, working spec viewer. But it's a really cool thing because it means that like I can do my really basic kit set design, build stuff there. We've got one across the road as well, but it just goes that next step. And in this day and age, it's So let's go back to our notifiable works and what goes on and the inspections. So membrane decking, wraps and cavity, right? And remembering, don't be surprised if you go and work in another council and they've got it different. They might call it a pre-clad or a pre-wrap. So you'll have a framing down here. It might be not called a framing, it's called a pre-wrap. So same concept, same idea, is just a bit different. And I think it's probably worthwhile knowing this inspection here, framing, was bought in the late 1990s because we were finding too many problems. All right. So you would have no framing inspection. You go from block work, membrane, cladding, you get to pre-line build. So in the pre-line build, the cladding is on, the roof is on, the windows are in, the insulation's in place, the electrical, the plumbing is just about to be lined with plasterboard before the jib goes on. So that's called a pre-line, right? Pre-line, an insulation inspection. Okay, so what was happening was we continually finding faults. So when you look at my little house plan over there, someone would decide, oh, they don't want those lintels or they don't want that room there. They're going to adjust that room, change it around, do it a little bit different, put a bigger window in there, whatever, right? And they never do any plans related to it. They just expect you to sign it off. Okay. So what they did is they really wanted to be customer friendly.
Sorry, Kyle, we can't hear you.
Is that better?
Yeah, now we can hear. I can hear you.
I
Thank
pulled on the
you.
lead. Sorry, I was
That's all right.
getting excited. What did you hear? When did you finish hearing?
Probably 1 minute ago, 2 minutes ago.
Okay, so pre-line build.
Okay, yeah.
Yep. Okay. So So the pre-line build scenario was essentially we introduced the framing inspection to actually deal with this problem, right? Because nobody wants to be delayed for 3 weeks from the architect or 20 working days from council, which is essentially a month and a half to stop the build. But technically, that's what the law says you have to do. So we came up with another solution. That's what the framing inspection is. So what you often find when you look at the checklist on the framing inspection, it looks very similar to the checklist on the pre-line build. All it's doing is double checking that actually you haven't gone in between the framing at that stage and decided to, the word is surreptitiously or lie or manipulate or do something that we didn't see in between that inspection and this inspection. So that's why it's very closely aligned. Okay. So in some instances, you might have, so you should be able to go down here and offset that one. Yep. And it's plumbing. So you will have pre-line. So we were always allocated, it's called 8 units, right? So 8 units, 4 8s, so 6. So whatever, 48 minutes. So there's 6 units in an hour. 1 unit is 10 minutes. So we would always have 6 units for an inspection, 48 minutes. Okay, but that included getting there. So it was never really that stressful when I was there. It got more stressful as the software got introduced and the laptop that got introduced. Now it's even more stressful because basically it's like they know exactly where you are. They know exactly when you started. They know exactly when you're finished, right? But you would still be, so when you've got getting an inspector, just realize that basically they're every minute of the day they're being watched, right? So the software controls your day on your laptop, on your software, on your pad. But yeah. So you might do a plumbing inspection, you might do an insulation inspection, and you might do a pre-line build. So technically, that's 3 inspections. Technically, that's 3 times 48 minutes. But most of the time, if you're doing a pre-line, well, all you're doing is checking brackets. Well, you've already checked the brackets at the framing. So unless there's new brackets being put in, new changes, and there's a minor variation available, that's 1 inspection you've probably already done. The only thing that you do at this stage from the perspective of pre-line is you're checking the moisture content, right? You're checking. So now the building is fully protected from the rain. And now you're checking basically the moisture on the timber. Okay. So if any of you have going to have any experience with building, just be aware, and I don't know what the council's position is on it at the moment, but there's a company called Jukan Nishu, all right, and they have a product called J-Frame, and it's a really cool product. So when you look at that screen, you can see it's got little lines in it, and little lines, so it's laminated together, right? So it's got little bits of timber all glued together. So really, it's plywood. It's plywood, but it's framing, and it's very, very straight. The problem as inspectors that we had is that we would normally do an inspection, and we would be checking the moisture in the timber. When you put your moisture meter into the Jukan Nishu framing, it measures it wrong, because it's measuring the glue, the formaldehyde glue, right? In a normal situation, in a H1.2, there is so on our moisture meters, they all require, what's the word? So you know how everything like has a default. I can't remember the brand of moisture meter, but anyway, it's got a default setting. Okay, so moisture meters, let's just go. I spell it with the American spelling. So see there, readings chart, right? So this is probably not a good example because they don't have, so this is a moisture meter that you're looking at that is what they call non-invasive. All right, so you can see it's got that little ball on it. So it's sitting against the jibboard. This is not the type of inspections that we're doing. We're doing invasive. So you see those prongs, right? So they're actually pronged. So you can see he's put them into the wall and into the framing. So just like you saw that Scala penetrometer guy going dink, 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 well, that's what this is here. All right. So that and that go together, right? So we are not that type of building inspector, which is a home survey. We are invasive. We invade, right? So these prongs probably go in about 13 to 15 millimeters. So you can't get a clear reading on the outside of the timber. You get a clear reading, especially with the type of timber we're using. It dries quite quickly, right? But it also, once it rains, it's wet, and then it'll dry real quick, right? So it'll only be a couple of mil in. So you're not going to get an accurate measurement, right? So the point being is that the hammer and prong is the one that we use to do the inspections. And so that's what we're doing at the pre-line. And we're checking the moisture. And does anybody know the right moisture content that we're supposed to have? Anybody? 22. You're close. Yep.
20.
So 20. Yep. So even closer. Yep. 18. So we've got
14.
We've got 18 here. We've got 18 in the room, ladies and gentlemen. So so it's interesting that so the point I was just making too earlier about the prongs was they have to have a calculation. So this is where some smart building inspectors think they've got it over the customer. It's all very much a power play. You just got to realize, firstly, you've got to be directed by your council about actually how you conduct yourself. And theoretically, you should be conducting yourself in a way called what I would call best practice. So best practice is, has anybody done any research on it? On inspection. So brands have done a research on best practice for building and for checking moisture, and it's 10. You've got to do it 10 times according to best practice. Now, let's be fair, I don't, and I haven't, right? But that's best practice. If two of those best practice hits around the 18% or less, sorry, is in the 19. So if you get 19 and 20 on 2 out of the 10, that's acceptable to best practice. Okay. But if you basically have 3 or 4, that might be in the 22, the house needs to be waiting a little bit longer. All right. Now, the other point I wanted to make was the treatment in the timber affects the reading. So H1.2 is boron treatment. All right. LOSP is liquefied ozol, whatever it is, right? It's got white spirits in it. Okay. Tannalized timber has got arsenic, it's got copper, it's got chromite. It affects the readings on the timber. J-frame affects the readings on the timber. So essentially what's been happening and what has happened, and I've been caught guys doing this, inspectors, I'd go into a building site and it's failed. This is an O to who that I can think of. And the woman's just pulling her hair out. She's wanting this house finished, right? And also what you're supposed to do, best practice, is that you actually write on the wall what that moisture reading is, actually around the prongs, because then I go back to those prongs and I double check it. Okay, so this guy he went to one wall which he knew was going to fail, and he was probably a Friday afternoon and he was wanting to go to the pub or go home or play golf or whatever it was, and he knew that it was wet. He did it, one check, failed, gone. Jobs failed. All right, but what he didn't check was the treatment in the timber affects the treatment, affects the readings. The readings got to be calculated. So whatever brand that you've got, Uniden, or there's these different brands of moisture meters, when you buy the moisture meter, you also get a booklet that converts basically the moisture reading to the correct reading, because it automatically defaults to its own product. Then it will give you a big thick book. Okay, this timber is Pinus radiata, this timber, and Pinus radiata treated with this type of treatment. It might be beech, it might be, different types of timber, global timber. So the books are pretty thick, but you do have to do it. Now, if a customer doesn't understand that, or a builder, he's just fearful, he'll just do whatever you say. You've got all the power, and some individual men know that. And I just think that that's wrong, and they're not being held accountable for their conduct. But the problem is, it just keeps happening. Okay? So, yeah. So just be aware that the moisture meters have a calculation. Okay? See, like after boron treatment, so it's currently, say, let's say 12 or 16%, but after it's treated with boron, it becomes 18%. So it's 2%. So yeah, just be aware that that can go on. Okay. Anyway, fire lining, that's the fire board. Post lining, so it's a plaster board. So when we're checking plaster board, we're checking the bracing only. So if you look at that house I've got over there, on that's consented set of plans, there's a bracing set of plans, and on the bracing set of plans, when I go to a building site, I'm checking the bracing only. Everything else, I probably presume that it complies to whatever the New Zealand standard is for plasterboard. I don't even think about it. I just go straight to the bracing because that's what I'm there to do. All right. And it's the same. So, yep. And then there's bathroom. That's the bathroom waterproofing, the shower waterproofing prior to them laying the tiles. Okay, so Auckland Council provides for waterproofing contractors to, if they pay a fee of $600 or something like that on a yearly basis, they can avoid having an inspector do the inspections for waterproofing. What they can do is they provide a PS3 and a warranty certificate on completion of the waterproofing, that they have complied to the building code. They're theoretically trained under Damp Fix Gold, Marpay. There's a whole lot of different brands of waterproofing. So in essence, they end up providing a waterproofing certificate for that. So actually that waterproofing inspection is being done by someone else. And then the waterproofing contractor rings the council and says, building consent number 12345. I've done the building inspection. Sorry, I've done the waterproofing. Here's my warranty certificate. Here's my PS3 for the product used. And then the girl or the guy at Auckland Council just presses a button, and essentially it's passed. Okay, fine, no problems. I go and work for PBC. PBC is owned privately. It's not owned by the council. They care intimately about making sure nothing happens and that they still have a business that's functioning. They inspect every waterproofing job. It's like, okay, so that's all cool, right? No problems. I can understand that Brent, Bevan, and Scott, they own this business. They want to make sure nothing happens, and they're in control, and they have every right to say that. So remember, Auckland, so PBC, Professional Building Consultants, is nationwide, but when it comes to inspections, they're only in Auckland, right? So here I am in Pakuranga, let's say, Howick, I don't know, that's their hood really. It's like they do a lot of their work. And I'm doing a final inspection. And I'm looking, and so I have to pre-check before I submit all this documentation to the office, because there's another lot of team called the certification team, which I'm going to talk to you about later. And they're supposed to check all the paperwork, but I just have to double check the paperwork while I'm on site and just eyeball and check. Actually, oh yeah, no, sweet, no problems, that's fine. So you reconcile all of the inspections while you're standing there, just to double check. So the final inspection always ends up to be about an hour. So it's a little bit longer, you know. So more often than not with PBC, there's no waterproofing inspection. So the job will go from like a post line, and then it'll go straight to final. The reason being is because the waterproofer doesn't realize that the contract that he signed with Auckland Council has no relationship to the private organisation PBC, because it's just waterproofing to him. He doesn't think about basically the intricacies of the way it's set up, or neither has he ever met Brent, Bevan, and Scott. So basically, you would get, it was quite often you go to a building site, do the final, and then, like, you think about it, how the heck do I know at a final the customer wants to move in tomorrow, rip up all the tiles, try and find out what waterproofing product you used? Oh, I don't know. And of course, more than often than not, it's not the builder that you're talking to, it's the owner, and they're like, oh, I don't know. It's said, you know, and I said, there's nothing on here that says you've had a waterproofing inspection. And so my boss, Scott, he goes, it's council, it's Auckland Council, it's there, it's basically what's happening is they changed their phones team. So they subcontracted out to another company to do all of the administration and phone calling. They were never told. So if you ring up council they would say, oh, that's a PBC job. You need to talk to PBC. Nah, and then neither did the phones team know about this relationship. Also, neither did the waterproofing contractor know that he had to ring up council. But he's not supposed to ring up council. He's supposed to ring PBC. But PBC wouldn't accept it anyway. They'd say, no, we do inspections for that. So it's obviously something went on anyway. So there was just, it would always be, escalated to my director. Like I would do my job and I'd take lots of photos and everything like that, and I'd leave it up to Scott to follow up. Because at the end of the day, there's, you're trying to check what the waterproofing is, and there's no evidence. And hopefully somewhere someone's done it. But so yeah, that's just a little trick that we came across, right? And then this thing here, this is something that Auckland does. I don't know about other councils, but what you can do is you can ring council. So now we're not talking about inspections. The CCC final, number 12, that's an inspection, right? But the actual pre-CC vetting is actually, we call it the CCC team, the Code of Compliance Findings team, the CCC team, right? So remember I just told you about the process of going through and double checking what consents and what inspections, what processing, what went on that job. Now the job has been completed or nearly completed. What would happen is the client would get 24 hours before I turned up a document called a CCC findings document. And on that document, it will tell you everything that you're supposed to have on the day or afterwards to actually get your CCC, Code Compliance Certificate. I thought it's a really cool tool. So it really prepares me, but it also prepares the client for basically me turning up. So what happens is I get an email and the client will get an email. So I get to look as well before I turn up. So I don't have to muck around sitting there trying to reconcile everything that went on because someone else has already done it. So that's really, and so from a technical perspective, that function wasn't, they had real issues in the government thinking, is that person a technical person? Is that person a vetting staff member, non-technical? What's their function? So then they rolled that person into a technical role. So you're a processor, inspector, or a CCC findings team, right? So that, ladies and gentlemen, is the process there. So then there's these other types of inspections. So tanking, that's block work on a sub base of a building where you're going to, or a retaining wall where you're going to build up against it. So tanking, that's what that is. It's got a waterproofing and there's a whole process on that. And drainage, that's self-explanatory. That's another inspection. And isolated pads, foundations, maybe you're going to put in a big pergola, or what do they call the word now? There's a word for it. Anyway, it's an extension of the lounge or whatever, or it could be a big deck that's being built. So that's what the isolated pads that you're talking about there. And then there's this thing called a site meeting, right? Often the site meeting is the homeowner has fired someone and they go, don't like the builder, don't like, it's predominantly the builder or the block layer or someone, they've fired them and they want a site meeting to actually, how do we move forward? How do we get beyond this problem? What do I need to do now? All right. So thinking basically of your assessment 1, that type of scenario where the homeowner doesn't know what to do, doesn't know what regulated documents mean, and needs some sort of pathway forward. So just while you know this as well, so I never knew this, but so when you look at a consent, it's designated dollar value. It's been set aside for inspections for that process of the whole. As a wallop of money. Okay, so there is the presumption. So in some instances, some councils will take a deposit based on 2 inspections, right? But you all know that's going to be 15 inspections. So that's actually, not healthy, because you as a customer have X amount of dollars to spend. If you knew that you need to allocate for 15 inspections at $195 to $220 an inspection, whatever, then you knew. So if you prepaid it up front, at least you know. Okay, so that site's meeting, that's extra. Any fail, that's extra. There's a presumption you're going to pass all your inspections, all right? And the interesting point I didn't realize is for example, I was telling you earlier about how I did 3 inspections at once to 48 minutes, 48 minutes, 48 minutes. So I'm trying to be customer friendly, and like I'll do the installation, I'll do the plumbing, I'll do everything in 48 minutes. Actually, I wasn't saving the customer anything, because we're still going to get paid 2 or 3 or whatever it is % of the price of the house, right? And our team, I don't know how it works, but I am presuming that we get paid and we bill out to another team at work to get paid. So your consent $7,000 or $8,000. That $7,000 or $8,000 sits in a bank account somewhere, which is in control of the finance team. The building consents team, they need to pay for people's wages or whatever it might be. The money gets transferred out and pays my wages. I don't know how it works that way, but I do know that there was no advantage to the client me doing 3 inspections at once, other than that basically it helps them with the speed of the build. All right. So that was a little bit of revelation to me. So I will try my best. I'll upload this into into Teams. You guys are welcome to look at it. Okay. And so also what you're looking at on the screen here is the way that Auckland Council name their inspections. Again, Waikato might be different. Northland might be different, but it's the same principle. In a foundation, what are you doing? You're checking a set out of the building boundaries. If they're unable to locate, so basically siting, right? A foundation siting, right? A foundation piles, a foundation strip footings, foundation timber retaining wall, right? Then concrete block, ICB, inspection concrete block. So I'm imagining that Auckland Council probably still uses the same tabs when they're doing stuff. So that's what that's about, okay? Yep. Oh, yeah, and then something that we don't do and I'm not teaching you about, and this is more the territorial authority world, and it's probably less and less, and that's weather tightness, rotten buildings. So we actually had 27 staff doing inspections, commercial and residential. Okay, so that's just the purest function of a new build, right? Then you had another team of 12 or 15, and they are in the reclad team. All right, so they are guys that may have been inspectors and decided, I just want to be part of this reclad team. So it's got nothing to do with the function of a BCA. This is a function of a TA. All right, so convene before any cladding's removed. So in essence, you can look here, and there you got the 4 different departments. So sorry, I was Auckland, so I worked at Auckland Central, right? but then there's South and then Henderson and Takapuna, right? So each one of those have a reclad team. So those are all the different types of inspections which relate to the ones up there. They just go a little bit deeper. And then typical types of inspections. So you can look at these. So the advantage with looking at this is it gives you an idea of actually what building codes you have to be referring to when you're doing your inspection. So B1 structure, right? So that's no longer, it's called C1 through to C6 now. It's updated. So D1 is access for disabled access issues. E1 is water on a site. Basically, if is the water on the site going to stay on the site? And F5 is to do with demolition, construction on a building site. All right. So yeah, I'm gonna go now to, so that's goes all the way through. So what are we up to? Page 89, but there's 400 pages. Okay, so there's plenty of information in there for you to read and look at if you want. But I would like to go back to here. You okay online, everybody? You're all very quiet.
Yeah, all good.
All
I'm
good.
okay.
Yeah.
I'm
All right.
okay too.
Good. We're okay. Now let's just that. Yes, so as you can see, so you see here, all of these. So that's the total amount that I was able to put in that lot, and then you come down here and we got more. All right, there's so much information in here. If you're wanting to say, like I was telling you about tanking, it's a good picture of what I mean by tanking, where you've got the construction coming up against the wall here, right there. So that's inspection. And then you have what they call a drain flow down the bottom, and they fill this up with, or before they do that, they actually put a protection on there. It might be polystyrene or it might be plastic or something, but they protect that. So as then the reason they protect it, this is mainly scoria, and scoria is quite sharp. So scoria will actually cut through the waterproofing. So by having a protection against that, it prevents it being pierced. And there are some products called, and one of them's called the Volclay, VOLCLAY. Okay, and it's actually self-healing. If you end up putting a nail through it and it could leak, it heals itself and grows around the leak and seals. So Volclay is actually from volcanoes, dust. So that's what Volclay is. It's a waterproofing, and it's put into a fabric. And there's another product where that Volclay is used, and it's called bentonite. So you can dig a foundation, you can fill the ground with bentonite, and then it's a slurry. And then what happens is you can start pouring concrete in. And so what happens is the foundation that you're digging. So if you know where Auckland Council's offices are, it's called the ASB Tower. It used to be called the ASB Tower next to Sky City. So they dug down with bentonite. They massive big trenches, and then they fill it with bentonite. So that stops the ground from collapsing. And then they pour in concrete, and the bentonite comes back out, and they replace it with concrete. and then they've got this massive ability to be able to dig out. So when you go into the ASB tower, it's 3 or 4 or 5 stories deep into the ground. But that's been tonight anyway. It's off this subject. So yeah, you are welcome to have a look at that, Teamsters. All right. So I'm going to exit that. I'm going to go back to here. So I'm going to try and find, go back to here. Just give me a second. I'll just do it from here where I can see it. I'll just stop that sharing. So just give me a second, guys. I'm just going through. Have a look what we got here. So I don't want to put you to sleep, you guys, but this is the this is the range of standards that you end up having to have an understanding of. So yeah, I know. I'll just make sure our students can see it online. So and let's be fair, you don't have to know all of them, right? But you can see, so NZS 3604, that's what I've talked to you about, okay? But if you go into NZS 3604, it also refers to NZS 3602, which is the treatment on the timber, okay? And all these other different ones have a interconnection or a relationship with your role as a building inspector, right? And hand on heart, I have never needed to refer to any of these standards, all right? Other than maybe 3604, okay? But really, I'm not going to go to NZS 3618 to understand the concept of mechanical stress grading on timber, all right? So when you're seeing timber, all you see is a word SG8, SG6, and SG10. So where that comes from is that standard 3618. If you want to get deep and you want to learn all about it, that's where you go. Now, the interesting point is you can't unless you want to pay, right? The government have done a good job, and that's out of fairness. So regardless of Labor or National, they've done a good job at sponsoring the standards, but some of the standards are not sponsored. So there's quite a few. So I'll just quickly go there, try and find that. Give me a second, team. So what you do to find that is you go standards, NZ, or .govt.nz, right? Standards. So then you go there, get standards, and you'll see over here this word sponsored standards. Okay, so sponsored standards. So you've got healthcare, testing and decontamination, high temperature heat pumps, but building related standards. Okay, so MB has funded a number of standards for free, and you can download them. Ministry of Business Innovation has funded the standards using the building code compliance for free download, making New Zealand one of the few countries to offer free access to building standards. This initiative fits within the standards strategy of working with regulators and industry to get more standards pre-funded, as well as enabling better access to standards that make a difference to families in New Zealand. Now, the point being, really what's being said there is that whole scenario of the little old New Zealand, everybody knows everybody, and the more skilled you become, the more you know people, and you get to the point where you're at the PhD level, and there's about 3 of you, and you're all funded by Carters or Fletchers or James Hardys to do your PhD. Are you a non-biased individual when you're asked to represent the government on the introduction of a new product? I would argue probably not. But the reality is that's New Zealand. We're a little country in the bottom of the South Pacific, and we're a first world country, so we've got to come up with solutions on how to deal with that. So one of the solutions the government has done is taken Standards New Zealand from being an outside over there department to bringing it under control in MB and getting an oversight on how it functions. So as we don't have the Graham Hart scenario of influencing joists and flooring and whatever products they're selling, or the Concrete Association by Wholesome Cement having their man sitting on there influencing basically how the standards are written to suit their products, right? Because you're not allowed to sell products in a standards. When you see Standards New Zealand and you look at it, you should see a a 125 pile. Now, very interesting. 125 by 125 pile is only created by sentence. So on one hand, we're not defining a specific product, but and saying that it's a 125 by 125 centon pile, but in actual fact we are. But they give you a choice. They go, you can use a 1 by 125 pile in a house, or you can use a 140 diameter pile, or you can use a concrete pile. So at least you got a choice, right? But anyway, the point being is I think that's part of their strategy, is to try and come up with a solution on what New Zealand might look like without undue influence from the manufacturers. So if you're looking at the screen, so these are the standards. So let's just have a look and see 3618. So I've got 3617, right? But I've got no evidence there. So there's 24, 37. So there's a few of them, but some of them. So also there might be that standard that's written in that book that I'm reading, or that slide might be out of date. But you can see, it's pretty, they've got a lot there, haven't they? And so let's just have a look. It might be a superseded standard. So it's 3640. No, it's not. So yeah, and I guess they've got a date at the top of that somewhere. 131 standards have been sponsored by the government. Remembering that 3604 as a retail price is $450. So if each one of these is of a similar price, 131 times $450, that's pretty cool. But yeah, just so as you know, team, you can find that out. So go back to that, there we go. Yep, So those are some of the standards I don't need to necessarily know in totality, but there's 3604 I've probably got an intimate relationship with. I understand it. 4121 is another one. That is the one that basically tells us how disabled access sites and so on for designed for access and mobility and associated, right? So it's that lot. So let's go there. No, there. There we go. And that's another one. So what have we got? Is that the same one? It's the same one. If I go enter. Oh, okay. Be like that. That one there. Our 4223 just there. And hot water, gas installation, masonry, veneer, cladding, swimming pool fencing standard, fire sprinklers. Oh yeah, that's just something that you need to take into consideration. Okay, so let's just go back. No, there's I've got the next one's final. No, let's do cladding. Let's do siting. Let's have a look. Sorry, I have to get real close. Badly designed on my part. Here we go. Now I need to make sure other students have got this. Nice. Okay. Okay. So funny, actually, I was see that little peg there. Has anybody ever seen one of these before? So this is your boundary, right? So the boundary peg for your section, and so obviously boundary peg. There's a little arrow. So if you are walking in Queen Street, I bet you if you walk down here outside these restaurants, you will see a little peg in the ground, right? Outside where the shop chairs are, like Starbucks, I bet you. So almost the same principle, but it's to do with property boundary. Those little pegs are the boundary for that shop. So the shop will pay Auckland Council so much per annum, and they've had to go and get a building consent for that shop to have those extra seats sitting on the footpath. And so the defining of where the boundary of that shop would be are those little steel pegs, right? So in some instances, in a boundary scenario, you might have a timber peg like that, but you also might have a concrete shot point on the concrete driveway, which will define the boundary line. Okay, so that's what that's about. So the purpose of the siting inspection is to ensure that all of the proposed building work is sited within the legal boundary of the property, and that the earthworks and the surface water runoff will not cause a nuisance to the neighbouring properties. So you're sort of, what happening is you're sort of, as a building inspector, you are there, nothing's been built yet, but you might be there for the ground scrape, you might be there for retaining wall, you might be there for, you know, like point load piles or something like that. So you're looking around beyond the boundary. So you do have to start thinking. So from the perspective of the boundary, you have to think of, and I'll use my little picture thing here somewhere. Where is it? That one? Or so there's sanitary sewer and stormwater that you need to take into consideration. And so you end up, oh, you bitch, where is it? Is it that one there? That one there? No, it's not that one. I really have to change the color of these. There we go. Oh, now it's not, oh, it's not going to help me. I want to, okay. So what I wanted to do was, you guys online aren't going to see this, okay? And I will have to drag this over so you guys can hear. I'll turn it around this way. No pens. Where's my pens gone? Come on, you bitch. Hey? Yeah, I know. Oh, I'm pulling the computer off. It's still in there. So I go to a building site and basically here we are there, that's a building site and that's another section there, right? So what I'm drawing is a rectangle online. That's the sanitary sewer there, okay? And that sanitary sewer goes across the property and that's another. So that distance between there and there is always 50 meters, 50. So therefore, these sections must be in around the 20-meter mark. So you're not only checking, say, like if this here is higher and this here is lower, the water coming across this property, have they taken into consideration, firstly, how to deal with that water flowing? Have they considered the fact that that is a public sanitary sewer pipe running through the middle of the section? Does the consented plan show that evidence or not? I don't know until I actually look at it. Has the engineer come and cited, or the surveyor properly cited for me, a peg here and a peg here to say that that is the reference point for where that pipe is? So we haven't started digging yet. And in some instances, council might ask for a CCTV. Check there before they dig, right? So we want a CCTV before, and then we want a CCTV after, because then we know there's damage. Okay, and that has to come with the paperwork, right? But at this stage, I'm just coming onto the site, and there's actually there's nothing there. It's just a pre-check to make sure that everybody understands their obligations of what's going on. All right. And I think it's an important point to make here. Sorry, you won't be able to see that. And that is that an engineer, he doesn't, he has no contract, neither actually legally in the law. He has no relationship to, see where I've got the word CCTV. That's not our section. That's not the section that consents on. The section that consents on is the next section over, But me, as a representative of council, I have an obligation to highlight to the engineer that actually he hasn't considered this, 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 and this. Okay? Because basically a engineer is very, so if you think of a horse and you look at a horse and he's got those blinkers on, that's basically the function of an engineer. The engineer is to deal with this section here and this pile with this house. I'm not worried, or I don't have a framework to think about the neighbor's property or this neighbor's property. All right. So that's where we would always get that conversation from the customer or the builder. Why are you guys here? Why do you even need to exist? We've got everybody and everything's done. But you've got to take into consideration that there is nobody that does what we do from the perspective of the council. It takes an overarching look at what's going on for the community. So that's our role. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Okay, so again, it's not a dissimilar picture, but what we tended to do, okay, when we would get to the building site was we would check 3 points on the pegs, okay, 3 points. So string lines would be in place, and there'd be a survey certificate or something. So if there wasn't, yeah, so they would check for 3 points. Let's just do that first, okay? I'll draw it. There, maybe measuring there. Right. Very, very rare we do that anymore, because of a litigious society we live in. Litigious meaning that we get sued. All right, we get it wrong, we get sued. So the better position to take is that you end up developing, you get a survey certificate. All right. So a survey certificate for the siting of the property. And so what we're checking is, is it a meter away from the boundary and all that type of thing, checking the distance of the eaves. So the eaves are the outside. So I'll show you. That's the eaves. This is a thing. That's what. So I would be checking from the perspective of the boundary based on where has the person drawn that those eaves are not going to be encroaching onto a fire into the neighbour's property. Again, the function we're doing right at the moment very closely to a processing function, because they haven't built anything yet. Right, so you're looking at the consented plans. Now you're actually on the building site. Also, the last one is identifying the corrosion zone. So great example, down on the waterfront was my last job in 2008, 2009. The contractor I was working for made a mistake. He did not put the thick type of roofing iron on, or he only priced for the thinner type or color steel. And essentially when you're actually so close to the sea, it is a requirement to have roofing iron that's not going to be affected by the sea salt. So, right, so the other issues with corrosion is any of the brackets. So it's 500 meters from the waterfront, and this is sitting inside the rule book called 3604. Okay, 500 meters from the waterfront, 200 meters from an estuary. All right, so you need to consider the brackets and the and products you use when it comes to the structure to make sure that they don't rust. Okay. Interestingly, a bracket when it comes to structure has to last for 50 years. Right? So therefore, the product, the steel that's used is stainless steel. So a lot of houses were redesigned, or not redesigned, in the future when they started to introduce that, is we need to avoid having stainless exposed to the air. So I did a build in Half Moon Bay, and it was really interesting because we just discussed it before. Brick veneer is not a structure, right? But for some unknown reason, Manukau City Council demanded that it's called used to be called it the galv angle. So it carries the bricks. So when you drive your car into a garage and you look above your head as you drive in, the garage has got bricks above the garage door. How do they hold the bricks up? They use an angle, a bit of steel. So this client, he wanted this detail. So it's $1,000 for 4 meters of stainless steel that I had to install on the garage. $1,000 for this 4 meter long bit of, because it was stainless and it was so close to Half Moon Bay Marina. So all very good. So also remember, if you ever want to live near the beach and you go, oh, I just love to live here. This is so good. You just got to remember there's all of these other things that you got to take into consideration. You got to be painting every 5 years. You got to be making sure, it's, yeah. So just think about that. Okay. Basically waking, and Josh was a great example this morning when he talked about, and I thought he did a really good job. I've never seen that before, when he drew the details of the ground, right? The quality of the ground. Weak ground is filled or is identified as a building inspector. A registered geotech is must and confirm the ground conditions are suitable. An engineer must provide a producer statement on completion of the work, and obviously as it progresses. So hopefully you don't want to be that person that's turning up. You want to know that someone like Josh already realizes that for the customer, or the architect has actually gone out and double checked the quality of the ground. Because why are you now an inspector doing work that the processor and the architect and the LBP should have done? You're the last man standing, and it's like, how did it get to this stage? But anyway, it does. All right. Yep. So checking basically that the building is not in a hollow, and if it is, what solutions have you got to actually make sure that the water doesn't pond. So in 3604, it talks about that. It basically says that you're not allowed to have water ponding under a floor. The reason being is it's not healthy, right? It causes people to be sick. As I started before, drainage services accurately located, flagged prior to the foundation. Check the depth of the drains to ensure that the board-driven piles are taken below the invert level of a drain, and record the diameter and the depth of the piles. All right, I'm just going to draw something on the screen, guys. Sorry about that. Not on the screen, but on the blackboard. So the invert level is the bottom of the pipe. Right, so the pipe is there and it's in the ground up here. Let's say that here is 3 meters. Right, so that there's the water that dribbles along the bottom of the pipe. That's what they call the invert level, okay? So that is that pipe there, right? So what was just said, what was just spoken there was, there's your pile. Your pile always goes 1 meter below the pipe, right? And then like here as well, goes 1 meter below. The reason being is the transfer weight did not put any pressure on the pipe. Yeah, so that's all about there. So what you're doing as an inspector is you're dropping your tape down there just to check. So you're dropping the architect, the surveyor is giving you, this point here, and says the invert level is there, and he's given you this, and he's given you the invert level there, so that's 1 meter, that might be 5 meters, so therefore that drain drops 4 meters from one side to the other. All right, so we should know pretty accurately what that point there is going to be, and what that point there is going to be. 6 meters from the foundation. So yeah, therefore that might be say 4.2, that might be 3.3. So, and they will have that written on there, and then do a drawing on the team on a screen for students. Let's have a look. So what I'll show you online, guys, let's just see if I can do it with my whiteboard. Okay. Yep. Okay, so we'll go with that. Done there. I will just go for a dark color. All right. So I originally talked about a section as being like that. There's your section. And then you've got another section that's here. Let's just say it's a nice straight line. Okay. And then, where's my rubber? There it is. So let's get rid of this square because that was the other day. The more I do it, the bigger it becomes. Perfect team. So we'll come back to here. So what we're talking about is, let's have a look. So let's go for blue. Let's just say it's stormwater. Stormwater pipe runs through the boundary like so, right? What I first started talking about was we check 3 points. We always check that point there, this point here and this point here. And then I end up having a string line on top of the pegs to measure. And so I measure 3 points. 1, 2, 3, right? So inside the boundary, inside the section, we've got the building, and the building is here and here and here. So that's the future building. So remembering that this is a site inspection. So the building hasn't been built. That's what I was saying, that this is very similar to processing in the sense that we're just double checking that everybody's done what they said that they were going to do. So when we use the string line for checking the boundary, we just use a string off, we measure off there to the corner. We would measure off there to the corner, and you just measure off there. Okay. What we're sort of looking for is it at least a meter or more down this one here off the boundary due to fire rating issues. Okay, so that's one of the ones that we're checking. And so get rid of that, get rid of that. So you may have heard me say that the reality is that in this day and age, we don't do that. We don't do a string line thing. Now in the country, in like other parts of New Zealand, where it's not as litigious or it's not as packed, maybe that's a good example, whereas it hasn't got many houses, you'll be able to buy yourself a nice 800 square meter, 1,000 square meter section, and you might have the building inspector come and use a string line. But in Auckland, pretty much guaranteed, you're after a certificate, and that certificate is like you've got 3 types that you require. So you have height in relation to boundary. You have the siting certificate, and that's the one that you could pick up at this stage, right? So that's 1, that's 2, but before, actually that's 3, but number 2 is finished floor level, right? So you're getting the height of this this one here, right? That's really an important one, and has a relationship to the height in relation to boundary. Because the finished floor level, you get that wrong, then the building goes wrong, right? And so we don't check the height in relation to boundary till the skeleton of the frames are all up like that and the trusses are on. So yeah, so that's really what that's about. Okay, so you guys happy for me to continue to 12:30? Okay, all right. Okay, so now let's go. So that's the site certificate stuff, and that is something that is wise to get from the perspective of the inspector at this stage, but you don't always get it. So there's a saying that my boss, John Lawrence, used to say, if it's not written down, it didn't happen. So on our documentation and on our checklists, it would be, I asked for the site certificate to be produced. At this stage, it was not produced, but I was told that it would be coming at the next inspection. All right, so I've written down what's actually happened. So then if I decide to go to Europe on holiday, then the next inspector would be looking at and checking the documentation to say, oh yes, I'm looking, where's the site certificate you said you're going to give Carl? All right. And then again, no site certificate produced. He writes that down. We get to the end of the CCC documentation. We won't want the site certificate. where's the height in relation to boundary certificate? Where's the finished floor level? How do we know that actually what's been built? So there's 3 opportunities for this to get resolved. Is that one, and then there's that one, and then there's that one. Okay, because when I worked at Mitchell Homes over in Beachlands, I know for a fact that they actually built the house over 2 sections. Right? Now that should not happen in the system, but then the surveyor had to go to insurance and pay for, I don't know how they resolved it, but basically this was a scenario where the section was no longer there anymore, that boundary. It was, I don't know, something like that. So the house was on this section and this section. So I don't know whatever happened about that, but whether they demolished that house and moved it or whatever, but it wasn't Mitchell Homes that had to pay for it. It was the surveyor. Okay. And so quite often, especially in some of these subdivisions, this happens where there's a mistake happened and you pretty much have to resolve it. I've got another video of a woman with Golden Homes who had her house built, sorry, not her house, another Golden Homes house built too closely to her house, and they didn't want to take responsibility, and this poor woman isn't allowed to start building her house until she had changed her boundary to suit them. But why does she have to change her boundary? Because they made a mistake. They made a mistake. They should rebuild their house. It's not her fault, but they wouldn't start her house. It's just like she was being threatened. It's like, whoa. But it's messy, gets messy. Okay, so the other thing I discussed on the screen, students online, is this issue of, so I talked about when you go to a building site and you're doing a site inspection for siting, you're checking the sanitary sewer pipe or the stormwater pipe or anything that might be of interest from the perspective of the council. The council own that, right? This person doesn't own it. They're going to feed into it, but this person here, and maybe say, let's person here, let's put the boundary back to its proper place, and let's get rid of that line through there. So then it's a bit easier. I'll get rid of that, get rid of that. So what we talked about was that the site surveyor has told me that at that boundary point there and at that boundary point there, the depth of the pipe is 3 meters. And at this point, it's 4 meters. Okay. And I talked about a thing called an invert level. All right. So there is a pipe, and the pipe has running water through it or sludge, whatever. Right. So there's your pipe. So then the ground, the finished ground level is, say, up here. So we've just been told that it's 4 meters and 3 meters, right? So what they're saying is at the invert level, that is the invert level there, right? So at that point, it's 4 meters. So when the house, which is a little bit less, let's just say here, let's say it is 3.7 meters. So therefore, from the top of the ground to the invert level is 3.7, right? So that's what that point there is. What's been said is you need to go 1 meter past, right? So you're going, there's your pipe, there's your couple of piles, and it's always 1 meter past. Okay, so there you'll have 2 piles, there'll be one here and there'll be one here, right? So as an inspector, so that thing there is 1 meter, or in total 4.7 meters deep. All right, it takes the pressure off this pipe. All right, we don't want the weight of the house pushing this pipe. Okay, so and I was just thinking you wouldn't come across, but in actual fact you do. On my house in the gardens, my sanitary sewer is 3 meters down. Like, you look at the sanitary sewer pipe, oh, yeah, sweet, and it's like, whoa. It's because I've got all these other neighbors that feed into it. So it's 3 meters down to my sanitary sewer pipe. So it's not unrealistic to imagine that. Okay. So, and at this end, it's 3 meters. So therefore, this pile, structural pile, let's say that is 3.2 meters. Right. So it's not 3.7, but it's 3.2. So we've got a similar, but now it's 4.7. So it'd be 4.2 meters down at this side. All right. Because the pipe's going on an angle like that. Right. And the piles are going down, and then they're going down, and then eventually the house is going to be built on top, but it's not going to put any pressure on the actual pipes, because we've got that going like that. And that's really, and so it is my job as an inspector to measure that, to check that, and then document it. So in some instances too, you might find them do it in the middle of the pile as well. So you'll have another one maybe coming through here in the middle of that to carry the to carry the weight. All right, to restrict any pressure on that pipe. So really, it's a pretty important function. Now, it can be also have no relationship to the slab. You can also have retaining walls. You know, a retaining wall. So you have a situation. So let's look at a section. So there's, say, the boundary. There's a house up here, like so. Okay. And then you've got a secondary section here. That's where you're building, going to be eventually building. But before you build, you have to build a retaining wall, like so. There's your retaining wall. Right. But you've got this pipe running through like so, and you want to build, but actually you can't, you're not allowed to put, you've got a retaining wall, you've got to run your retaining wall down again past, just at the point of where that retaining wall is, past the pipe, 1 meter past, right? Same principle. You don't want any of this transfer weight coming down and breaking that pipe. Okay, so if you go past it, then, right, so looking at it from another angle, so again, those 2 sections, this one here is that top house up top, and you've got stormwater coming through on an angle like so. You've got your house that you're going to build here, but before your house, you want to be able to retain some of that dirt that's here. So you've got these retaining walls like so, putting in here, right? So it's not all of them. It's only this one here that you have to turn deeper, go deeper. It's only that one. right? And then obviously you've got your house going on there as well. So you can see how complex it gets, when you're dealing with a lot of these sections. And I had to, so let's go back. I wonder if none of those. So let's just go back. Yeah, don't worry about that. So I remember getting called out to, and I'll show you in a second online team, just wait a second, to Mellons Bay. And it was, let's just go Mellons Bay. Mellons Bay is in Howick. All right. That's my old hood. Okay, so down over here. Right, so let's just let the other students have access to this. Right, so when you get to the bottom of Mellons Bay, beach is down here. There's your Mellons Bay, there's the bottom of Mellons Bay there. So in this up here, and I suppose you're not going to be able to, so there is these sections here, and it's up in here. They were digging out, and it might be like this one here that they were digging out, and I had to go to the building site to check that the building wasn't going to that the dig out wasn't going to collapse this building over the weekend. So yeah, we had to drive out to up to the beach. So I don't think you'll be able to. Oh, you might be able to. Sweet. Let's have a look. And it's okay. So look. Yeah, no, it's not taking us there. Yeah, you can. So it's quite steep. And it's like, wow, man alive. So there are circumstances where essentially they're trying to, they're building in more difficult areas around Auckland where there's some really risky sort of builds. So I was standing down in there, and you can't really see it, but this building is sitting quite a bit above this building, and they dug this out quite a bit down, and we're talking 6, 7, 8 meters. So the retaining wall basically was to hold this building up here. But yeah. So those are the sorts of things that you end up having to do from the perspective of design, because they're wanting a pretty decent type of house in there, and you can't really get the indication. Looks like it's finished. There's a swimming pool there. Yeah. So I remember walking up through here, coming up through the back here, and just looking at it. So not really. Yeah. So anyway, it's just one of the many jobs that you've got to be checking when it comes to that. So you've got to be pre-thinking of the way that site inspection required for building work for with very few exceptions, such as internal alterations. Oh yeah, a common mistake for any builder is to misidentify a boundary peg, or worse still, site the building off a boundary fence, and I got hauled over the coals for that, especially in Sandringham. So Sandringham down not far from the Eden Park. So boundary trees. So there's trees there, right? They've been there for 50, 60 years. There's fences. They've been there for 50 or 60 years. It all looks like the boundary to me and to you. But what Mark Tucker was sort of defining and reminding me of, that doesn't actually mean that it's true. So if I told you the story about the parallelogram or shape of properties and the change from land and from the old system, the DOSLI system, to the Land Information New Zealand system? No. Okay. So what happened? So again, this is a worthwhile you guys knowing, and that is that what happened was the government went digital. Okay, and they went digital because obviously it's far more accurate to be measuring off 6 satellites and than actually relying on something that was done in 1840s and 1850s. So what happened? They created. I suppose it was a worldwide trend. So they went to a geodesic satellite connection scenario. Okay, so and a great example of how it can go wrong or could go wrong is down near, as I said to you, the Eden Park. So I checked a boundary off a hedge, and that wasn't the right thing to do. But if we go to Eden Park, right, so Coldplay there on the weekend. It was awesome. I didn't go, but I knew about it, and everybody around me went, it seemed. Okay, so Rema, so over here. All right, so in this, all this suburb through here, Ethel Street, Shore Street, these sections, they look to you and I like they are parallelogram, okay? But they're not. After they changed from the old system to the new system, each section is they've lost a meter. So they've all become like this. They've gone. So each house. So I was doing the inspections on this place here. So they haven't dealt with it as such, but each this property is owned by this property, and this property is owned by this property by a meter. So you can see the carports or the what they put on the front of the property and the shape of it, and so you can see a little bit of it there. But yeah, when I was doing the finals for this, I was asking for the site survey certificate, and it showed that it comes across the front here like this, like the sections. Each section loses a meter, and they gain a meter of their neighbours. But these houses are back in the 1890s, 1900s. So you've just got to be aware when you go to buy in that street, and a lot of the areas that the actual boundary is not the boundary. So yeah, just bear that in mind. And then you've got to have a really good relationship with your neighbour. if you basically want to do any extensions and so on, you've got to pretty much get their agreement. Am I allowed to drive over your driveway, which is my driveway? You know, I don't know how they resolve that, but technically, you know, yeah. And what? I mean, these properties are $3 or $4 million each. So it's not cheap. You know, land, it's the land that's expensive. So yeah. All right. So let's just have a little bit of a break, and can we come back at 1 o'clock? Yeah, 1 to 1:30. Right.